Okay, so let's have a little chat about how you can leverage your super to purchase your first or next home. This product is called the Housing Affordability Solutions. And what I'll do is I'll just going to draw a line down here. On this side of the line, we're going to talk about the finance required to buy a house. Let's use an example of 400,000. And on this side, we're going to talk about how you leverage your super to accommodate that purchase. All right, so this is an example of how most people have their super set up. It's in an industry fund. A portion of their pay goes into their industry fund, and they usually will have a financial manager who will be managing that fund, and a lot of people don't have anything to do with it. Essentially, what that financial manager does, I'll just draw a little compliance wall here. He will make investments on your behalf, maybe in shares, mutual funds, maybe even property that you don't even know that you're already involved in some type of property investment. This is usually something when I ask clients, they usually don't know what the financial manager is investing their money in. They just know that it comes back in the form of a return on their investment, and their super should go up in value. So that's a traditional industry fund, and most people operate within sort of the realms of what I just described there. What you're allowed to do is you can actually open up a self-managed super fund, and this is part of the leveraging part of your super to buy a house. And you can move say 100,000 into a self-managed super fund, just for an example. Now that self-managed super fund, what the 100,000 basically ends up in your bank account for all intents and purposes. Now, the self-managed super fund is now you are the new financial manager. You're managing this fund and where the money is going to be invested. So you still have a compliance wall to pass through. So in other words, you can't take the 100,000 and go, oh, I just want to pay off my personal loan and come up with a deposit for a house. It doesn't work that way. There's massive penalties and fees associated with not being compliant within a self-managed super fund, which has an annual tax return and an annual audit attached to it. So this has to be done properly, which is why I'm going through this general advice model with you now. So what you can do with that 100,000 is similar to the financial manager investing in various investment instruments. You can also invest in something. So you can invest in something called, we'll call it the Housing Affordability Solutions. Now this is the product that will allow you to leverage super to purchase a house over on this side of the equation. The actual investment vehicle is a property trust called the Storehouse Trust. Now, how this works is you can move money from your bank account, which is your self-managed super fund, and you can move that into the Housing Affordability Solutions Property Trust or Storehouse Trust. Now, this is an investment vehicle, and the same as up in this area here, you also have other investors that are inside this property trust. Now, what this property trust does is it invests in houses in the form of shared equity all throughout Australia. So shared equity just means you share a little bit of the house with them. Now, you're not sharing ownership, you're sharing equity. So what that means is that for example, that $400,000 house, you may want to share 20% shared equity. So you own the house 100%, but the shared equity is 20%. And all that means is that because you're participating in this investment vehicle, you have the right to choose one of the houses to be put into this trust. So remember, there's several houses up here that are already in the trust. You can say, hey, I want this house over here that I'm going to purchase for $400,000. I'm participating. I would like that house in the trust as well. So what they can do is they go, okay, no problem. We'll enter into a shared equity position of 20% with you, and 20% of 400 is $80,000. So they're basically going to lend you $80,000. So there's the shared equity piece. So you have an equity position already of 80 grand. So that is lent to you. Now that is, just talk a little bit about mortgages for a second. That is lent to you as a second mortgage. So when you buy a house, and they actually lend you some money to buy that house, that's generally a first mortgage. So that's where you save up the 10 or 20% deposit yourself, and then they lend you the rest. That's a first mortgage. So to secure the loan, the Housing Affordability Solutions will offer you a second mortgage, which represents 20% of the purchase price. Okay? So where's the rest of the money come from? Well, the first mortgage is $320,000, which is 80% of the purchase price. So there's a first mortgage lender and a second mortgage lender. That adds up to 100% or $400,000. So what's happening is you're entering into a mortgage to purchase the house, and the house is 100% in your name. So, but what happens is the 20% position, the shared equity position, is only on, you're only sharing any amount as a percentage above 400. So let's just say this house goes up in value in 3 years to 450,000, just hypothetically, right? So the 50,000 that it increased is, and if we times that by 20%, which is your shared equity agreement, is 10,000. So this is not a mortgage that you would put in place for 30 years. You basically are just utilizing it to leverage your super to enter the market. So in 3 years, for example, say 3 to 5 years, it goes up in value 50,000. You'll probably want to just refinance and go back to a traditional lender, Westpac or Bank West or whatever. But to do that, you will have to share a piece of the house as far as the equity is concerned. So $50,000 equity times 20% is $10,000. So when we refinance you back into the traditional market, lending market, that $10,000 returns to the investment vehicle, and that's how this investment vehicle can return an interest rate to you as the investor, because you're both an investor on this side and you're an investor on this side too, because you're buying a house, but you're doing it in the form of borrowing money. So let's say, so if we can project this over, this now $400,000 house is now part of the hundreds of houses that are in this portfolio that you've invested in. So this house might be in Sydney, this house might be in Cairns, this house might be in Perth, Bunbury, wherever these houses are. But every 3 years or so, they start to refinance. So that one in Sydney, they are sharing 40,000 in equity, and that goes into the trust. And then the one in Cairns, they may be 30K in equity, and that goes back into the trust. So you're not actually getting the 30 or 40K, but you're participating in the Housing Affordability Solutions Storehouse Trust investment vehicle, and it's returning an investment to you, and your super that you've invested, in this case, let's just say it was 100 grand, is going up in value. Very similar to your industry fund that you had invested probably in property anyway, you didn't even know about it. So this is the shared equity component and the product is called the Housing Affordability Solutions. And this works with any residential property, whether it's a house and land or an existing property. So now that I've shown you sort of the concept, let's flip over to a Funds to Complete worksheet just so you can see how the numbers actually work out as far as how do you actually buy a house leveraging your super. So let's do that now, and we'll see you when I change this screen. Thank you. Okay, so now here's a Funds to Complete worksheet. So what this is if we look down the left-hand side of this column, these are the costs to buy a house. So if you were to buy a house for $400,000, and you would have to pay various mortgage registration fees. There's a settlement agent fee in WA or a solicitor fee in other states. There's some adjustments to rates and taxes, and everybody has to pay stamp duty. So assuming you're a first home buyer in WA, there's no stamp duty. So you'd have to come up with $403,188. So where we get that from is we already talked about the first mortgage being 80% of the purchase price, $320,000, which was in our diagram that we described a little earlier. The second mortgage, which is the Housing Affordability Solutions, is $70,000. So the reason I'm doing it, I know the original example was 20%, but I'm doing it in two pieces because there's in this particular scenario, you actually don't need 20%. So you don't actually have to share more equity than you need. So for example, in this case, I'm 17.5% of 400,000 is 70,000, and that raises 403,000 if you're a first home buyer. So you get the grant, you put in 3,000 of your own money, you get a first and a second mortgage leveraging your super for this amount, and then you have enough to buy the house. So that's how the Funds to Complete worksheet and where the numbers all line up. So now you're only sharing 17.5%. How the lending components work is 80% of the mortgage it's a traditional principal plus interest mortgage over 30 years. It's the same as any other mortgage. It's at around 2.69% is the interest rate. So it's quite a good mortgage. And again, it's for about 3 years or 4 years till you have enough equity to move on to more of a traditional lender. The second mortgage is this is interest only. And now this is at 3.25%, which again is a very low rate. The Housing Affordability Solutions isn't a traditional lender where they're trying to make money off the margins. In other words, banks lend to you and so they can make money off of the interest rate. The Housing Affordability Solutions is lending to you to share equity to move that shared equity position in the form of the example I used was $10,000 goes back into the investment vehicle, which is shared amongst the investors with like I said, with which you are one of them. So their investment vehicle is shared equity, not margin lending like a traditional lender. So the rates are quite low, as you can see in my example. Now, what we try to do is we really want you to concentrate on paying your first mortgage off. So you would only have a first mortgage payment because what happens is the interest only component on the second mortgage. So if we took $70,000 times 0.0325 and we divide and we came up with a payment, that would be a monthly payment of about $189 a month. Now, what we do with that is what we want to actually pay this $189 a month. If I can type it in, we prepay this 3 years in advance. So if I was to take $189 a month and I put it down here, 3 years interest, 189 times 36 months, 3 years in advance, 6,804 is paid up front out of your super investment. So you do not have a payment on this second mortgage. And the reason we do that is we want you to concentrate on paying off your first mortgage, okay? Because we want in 3 to 4 years for you to have the equity. Not only will your house go up in value so we can create some equity, but we also want you to concentrate on paying off your first mortgage as quickly as possible, or paying down your first mortgage as quickly as possible, so you can refinance and free up your super investment, because we only need it for 3 or 4 years to get you into the house. So in the example, I think I said you had 120,000 in super. So this is a calculation of how much you actually have to put into the Haas investment vehicle. And what it is you have the second mortgage, which you have to borrow, which is 70. And that's 17.5% shared equity position. Now there's a Haas fee of 14,000. Now this covers legal fees and risk fees. So so let's just go back up here. There was a risk fee, is also known as lender's mortgage insurance. So if you went to the bank with $3,000 and saying, I'd like to buy a $400,000 house, well, they wouldn't lend to you in the first place, because you have to have 5% to 10% genuine savings plus pay a bunch of lender's mortgage insurance. But let's just say, for the sake of this example, that you could borrow from the bank. The lender's mortgage fee would probably be in around the $20,000 mark. Now, the lender's mortgage insurance is just a risk fee that you give to the bank. There's no other benefit to it. But because we've split the mortgages into a first and a second, the first mortgage is at 80%. So what happens is there's no lender's mortgage insurance. So which is why I didn't put that in the first place. But there is a risk fee, because you're borrowing 97.5%. So there is a risk fee, but it is much less, and it also covers some other fees that are associated with entering into a shared equity agreement with Haas. Now the 3 years interest, I'm just totaling up these numbers here. So the 3 years interest in advance, so the 189 times 36 payments is here, and we have a little buffer, and this is just to make sure that there's enough money in the Haas investment. And then you would actually, of your 120, you would invest 100,804 into the housing affordability solutions. That investment, less any of the fees that come out, would then be paid a return on investment for participating in the investment side of the leveraging. So that's how you purchase a $400,000 home as a first home buyer. Now remember, you can do this with on existing or house and land packages. So let's talk a little bit about what would happen if you purchased a $400,000 house and you're a second home buyer, and you, for whatever reason, there are a lot of things that happen in life that don't put people in positions where they can actually save up the deposit, but they would still like to leverage their super to buy a property. So let's look at this $400,000 house as a second home that you're purchasing. So let's take out, you're not going to get the first home buyer grant, so you're not going to get that money. And there's still no LMI, because we're going to stay at 80%, but there's going to be stamp duty. So if we go to the stamp duty calculator, a $400,000 house in WA to be purchased as an owner-occupied house is $13,015. So you now have to come up to purchase a $400,000 house as a non-first home buyer. You have to come up with $416,203. So as you can tell, based on what we've already produced on the spreadsheet, you're $23,000 short. So let's have a look at how we can actually help non-first home buyers buy the house. Well, there's a couple of ways. The first way, we'll leave your own funds as 3,000, for example. We know the 80% is 320, so that's correct. We can leave the 17.5% there, but we can also do something where it's still, remember in the earlier example I said you can go to 20% shared equity. Depending on how strong you are as an applicant, we might be able to even go to 21% or something like that. So we are short $23,203. So we need to come up with $23,500, say, for example. Now we have enough money to buy this house. But where does this $23,000 come from? Well, some of our clients have a little bit more than $120,000 in super. So they may have $150,000 in super. So we still have the $70,000 here. We still have the risk fee and the 3 years payment in advance and the buffer. But what if we did a HAAS top up? Now it's still, so the HAAS top up piece basically allows us to also finance a portion of your stamp duty and any of your shortfall. So in this case, the HAAS top up is $23,500, right? And now how the HAAS top up works, which is why I've got it in sort of two different categories. This is another loan, principal plus interest. It is all one facility, but it has a different payment. Again, they're not making money on the margins. It's only 5% is the interest rate, but this one is amortized over 10 years like a personal loan. Okay, so if we were to work out what the payment would be on something like $23,000 top-up loan, just bear with me while I calculate this. So on $23,500, if we amortize that over 10 years at 5% is the payment, then your monthly payment would be $249 per month. Okay, again, we would prepay 3 years in advance because we want you from your super, because we want you to concentrate on paying this first mortgage off. So if we go to that HAAS top up of $23,500, we now have that amount calculated in our investment amount required. Now we need to work out 3 years P plus I in advance. And that would be the $249 payment times 36 months, $8,964. So now if we go and add that up, you're now required, your HAAS investment to participate is now $133,268. So that's an example of how we can help clients who are not first home buyers and still need a little help with the stamp duty. So that's one example. Now, I'm just going to expand this a little bit more. So we've reviewed a $400,000 first home buyer purchase. Again, this is on existing homes, whether they're existing homes or house and land packages. And we've also looked at somebody who's not a first home buyer. So let's look at someone who's not a first home buyer that doesn't want to give up all of this equity, and they don't want to enter into a top-up agreement. They just maybe they only want to share 17.5%, not 21%. So let's just take this out of the equation. What happens is there are some land agents that have something called seller terms or rebates. So if you're working with a certain builder, some of them can make arrangements to give you the benefit of a rebate, let's call it a seller rebate of say $15,000, and then maybe a builder rebate of $10,000, something like that. So what happens is if you looked at the numbers as I was typing that in, the surplus or deficit, the deficit became a surplus. So there are other arrangements that can be made if you're dealing with a builder and a land agent. Just because this is rebates are available, or terms are available within the different types of purchases. Now, for another example is there's apartments being sold in Perth as well, where let's just take out the builder rebate. Let's look at an apartment. So in other words, something that's already built. We have sellers, we have developers who are selling properties for $400,000, and they're giving rebates up to say $30,000, right? So what that, in this particular scenario, say you bought an apartment from a developer who could give you a $30,000 rebate. We actually have a surplus of $6,700 now. So that means you can reduce your investment by $60,000 in this particular case, to say $65,000. So you're not sharing as much equity. So if we go 65,000 divided by 400, 65,000 divided by 400,000. So that's now 16. So now you're only sharing 16.2% of your equity. So if we went down and we changed these numbers, we'd have 65,000. We'd have 3 years in advance, which would probably be about 6,500, a bit lower. We wouldn't need the top up, and we wouldn't need the payment in advance. So now you're down to a Haas investment of 95.5 out of your super investment. So this is how various purchases can be negotiated to allow you to leverage your super to purchase your first or next home. Hope that makes sense. There'll be a quick chat button available to you to book in a time with me, so we can look at your specific situation and we can see how we can help you. Thanks for your time.